Okay, good afternoon, everybody. What are we going to talk about today as another quick tip, kind of a project that you can make things at home, sell them for money. Again, I take photographs of everything. I show them to friends. They sort through them. They ask me questions, and occasionally they buy things, and they add their own little tweaks to it. And I give them a price accordingly. But I carry lots of photos on my phone. It's my way of advertising, and I keep repeating in the videos, I'm not making like a living so much doing this as I'm fueling my hobby. I make things, I sell them, and about close to 100% of the money I put back into tools, materials, or whatever I need. That's what I do. Other people want to try to make a run of this of a business. That's fine, but that's not really the point of the videos. The point of these is I'm showing you, I think, simple projects that you can do at home with basic tools. I'm going to throw up a video. We're going to discuss how to make your own benches, whether it's outside of your house or you want to make them for somebody. Those things are fine. So let's get right after it. No intros. Remember, boom, let's do it. Here we go. Okay, let's take a look at the upper left. Let's take a look at, like I always say, let's dissect this. He had some flat plate steel, probably around 1/8 of an inch thick, that he used for the very bottom base. And you can set this on your concrete floor. You can use a square. You can use those magnets that you buy, I keep saying, from out at Harbor Freight. They're great for creating these verticals in an absolute nice plumb way and keeping things square. So he probably went ahead and he built those verticals, those four legs off of that flat plate steel, built them up, and then he did the other pieces that come across on top. And you can put steel on those open end caps, on those open ends of the tubular steel, and weld them. Then you sit there with a flap wheel and an angle grinder, and you can grind them down nice and smooth, make them look great. And then he turned around and he started to work on the seating. Now, those are just two pieces that stick out of that tube steel, and again, he plugged the ends of them with flat steel, welded them up, ground them down, and he probably underneath of here, which is hard to see, he has a flat piece of steel or two flat pieces that run totally across. You can drill holes, set your boards on there, keep a gap in these boards, don't make them tight. Wood expands and contracts, you'll have problems. I use a nail, a framing nail, and I put it in between those pieces of wood, even on the top when I make these. That way it allows for that expansion and contraction. You can sand them, stain them, whatever you want to do at this point. But this makes a nice, easy to make bench. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of thought into keeping things square, plumb, and even. Okay, but and you can use 2x6s, 2x8s, you can use 2x4s. You can use whatever you want, whatever you think looks good, or you can use pine for like the top. For the seating, I wouldn't use that thin pine out of the big box. I would use, like I said, 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s. Let's take a look at the picture on the bottom. This is another variation. He used some old wagon kind of wheels as a decorative addition to the table. It looks pretty cool. He made the backs of these. You can see where that flat steel is a little slanted so that when you lean back, it's not perfectly straight up and down. That's a good idea to do. You can do this in a vise. You can put them in there. You can heat them up and bend them. Or if you're not going like too thick and too wide, you can actually just bend these with a hammer and just by tapping on them. And you can bend them to the angle you want, match up all your pieces, make sure the angles are all the same. You can weld them to the underneath side like he did, and that creates your back support. And again, you drill the holes through the steel, line up your wood, mark your holes, drill through it. And again, I would countersink in the front of this where you're leaning back, those bolts or screws. I keep saying screws, I mean bolts. I would countersink them so the bolts sit flat, flush back into the wood. And again, he put spacing, which is a very smart idea. Like I said, you don't ever want things sucked up nice and tight. Let's take a look at the one bottom right. Now, that's off of one of these SCE or one of these power line people on those big spools. He used the spool table. And he created that, and then he went down and bought a bunch of plumbing type pipe, and then he built his base. Okay, now that's another possibility. Not one that I favor, but I threw it up here for completion's sake so you can see there are other ways to do these. Let's take a look at the upper right. Now the upper right is a nice way of doing this because the seat becomes adjustable, or you can pull it back or you can scoot it forward, and it's a little bit unlike the one on the upper left where it's a permanent seat. Again, this is made out of all tube steel. It's fast, it's easy to do. All you have to do is go to the steel supply place, pick out your steel, And if you take a real close look on the one on the upper right, you can see where he has flat metal that's welded that goes up, and it probably comes out a little bit, and that creates the base where you can secure the wood to. Now, you don't have to use Douglas fir. You can go out, you can buy redwood, you can buy all different kinds of wood. Just depends on what the big box stores have. But again, because of expansion and contraction, you want the gap even in the top, whatever board you use. You can create these. It's not that hard to do. I mean, it's easy. You just have to get out and start it. Let me throw up another picture of a bench that where I work, the shop actually made a bench for outside of one of the doors. Let me show you that. I'll tear down a couple of these pictures. Hold on. Okay, let's take a look here on the bottom left. This is a bench they made in the shop where I work. It's just a very simple bench. But, I mean, I took a look at this and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. Now, they anchored it into the ground. If you look at the picture on the right, they actually went down into the concrete and they used redheads or whatever, and they secured the bench to the concrete. But you can modify this down here and make them, the bottom part where that flat steel is, you can make it, longer. You can create cross pieces, whatever you want to do if you didn't want to bolt it down. The interesting part about what they did here is take a look at, they've got 3 pieces of steel going across the back where they brought it down and they bent it over to attach to the seating. Now underneath of this, and I couldn't get a shot of it, is a piece of metal that runs, the full length here. And they simply just put these 2x4s down on there with the spacing and created the bench seat. Then you can see underneath these armrests where they just took a piece. I asked the guy how he did it. Now take a look at one of my previous videos on how to bend metal. He have a little jig over in his shop where he used, like I show you in one of the videos, how to make one. They're fast, simple to use. And it's what gave me the idea of making other jigs. But anyway, he made the jig. He set the flat piece of steel in there. He didn't use heat, and he bent these arcs that he uses right here. And then he put a 2x4 piece on top for an armrest. Real simple, real fast to do. He told me it took him all of about 5 minutes in the jig to bend all 3 of these and into the arc. Then underneath, I mean, he drilled holes, and then from underneath he marked, and then he put screws up under there before he put the slats that create the seat. Because I was asking him, well, hey, how did you put this together in what sequence? Now, you can come for the armrest from the top down, of course, and you can countersink the bolts. It won't look bad. They just wanted them hidden when they made it, so they came from the bottom up. And they just did it before they actually put, like I said, the final part of the seating on there. Then he used that same simple jig to bend those back braces, 1, 2, 3. Now this is some pretty decent thick steel, but like he said, you have people that lean back against them hard. He wanted something that wasn't going to bend. And then by attaching the armrest pieces of steel to those back support ones and welding them, it creates the additional strength, which I thought was a pretty good idea. So it's pretty clever when they did this. And then they turned around, like I said, and they put the wood across there. Now, the wood on here is incredibly weathered. If you want a very simple finish to put on something and you want to leave it natural looking, you can use linseed oil. You can mix a little bit of mineral spirits with it and, to thin it out, and then put it on here and then let it soak for, I don't know, good 30 minutes. Go over it again, let it soak. Go over it again, let it soak, and then wipe it down good. Don't leave linseed oil just sitting on there. It'll turn out to be a gummy mess. But that's a fast finish. That's all they put on this because they were trying to hurry up and get this thing out. This has been out there for years, and you can see how the wood's beginning to deteriorate because nobody kept up on any preventative maintenance work on the wood of the bench. But it's like he told me, who cares? When it gets bad enough, we'll just buy new 2x4s, and they're quickly and easily replaced, because even on the bottom side, if you take a close look at this, they used screws to hold these 2x4s in place. So he'd just get underneath there, with his cordless drill and, probably a Phillips, and undo the screws. The wood comes off. He replaces the wood because the holes are already pre-drilled into the steel. He just sets them on there and goes zap, 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 and he's got a brand new seat in a matter of, 20 minutes. Anyway, these are the thoughts, questions, and answers real quick, folks. I think your question relates to the kind of wood. This is what I would do if it's going to be outside of my house. I would go out and I would selectively pick it out. Redwood is more durable. It's going to last you a hell of a lot longer, but you're going to pay more for it. But I would hand pick them and get something that's got some really nice looking grain to it and wavy patterns or some character, and not just grab anything. You can go to a local lumber yard too, or you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot. But I would selectively go through and pick out my wood, definitely, and I would tilt it up on its end and look down it. You don't want to get a bunch of really warped or damaged split pieces. And you have to do that out of the big box stores because there's tons of wood out there that is warped beyond belief. It's not flat, it's not straight, it's got splits in it. Sometimes small splitting at the ends doesn't bother me because I'm going to cut it. Other times it does bother me. But I always look for wood that's got really good character in it if it's something that's going to be visible. This would be visible. You're not just framing, you're actually doing something that's going to show. Finishes, you could finish this a whole bunch of different ways. That's almost like in a whole video. Take a look out at Lowe's and Home Depot. There are outdoor preservatives. There's preserva wood. It comes in a bunch of different colors. And you don't have to do much of anything else if you don't want to. You can apply it, like I've got some in teak, and after you apply it, leave it alone, it just water beads falls right off of it. Now every 6, 8 months or a year, if you wanted to, you could just put another coat of the preserva wood on there, and that's all there is to, maintaining the finish. You don't have to put, and I would not put, polyurethanes and stuff like that on there. It's going to crack out in the sun real bad. Unless you start getting into the real high-end stuff like, Man of War, McCluskey's, things like that. But I wouldn't do that. I would just put a natural oil kind of stain finish on this, something that's easy to maintain. That's just my advice. Would I use glue on any of these? No, I wouldn't, because you're going from wood to steel with a gap. So no, I wouldn't use glue at all. I use good quality steel screws. Now you can get away with drywall screws, but like I've always said, they're brittle, they snap easy. I don't want to mess with them. I like good quality steels, and I use the hex head or Torx. But look, there's nothing wrong with the Phillips if that's what you have, but I would still use good quality steel screws. What about sanding? Well, people are going to sit on this. You don't want them to have splinters. These I would replace in the bench in a split second, but they haven't done that yet. The other one's 150, 180. That's all you need to do. I mean, you don't need to go overboard. This is outdoor furniture. But somewhere around that, I would start off. Would I use 60 grit to start off with? No, not unless I need to do some leveling. And if I had to do that, look at my previous video on how to correctly use a belt sander. 60, 80, 120 maybe on my belt sander if that's what's needed. Let's say that the boards look fairly good. I would probably just do 120 on my belt sander. Then I switch over to a random orbital. And then I start going through my grits. I'll go from either 100 or 120 to 150, and that's it. 180 at most. It just depends on what I'm trying to do. But I would take off all the edges. I would round them over. All the sharp edges. I would get rid of anything that I thought was going to be a splinter or something, because you want it to turn out nice. Spend a little bit of extra time on your finish. It'll turn out beautiful. And especially if you pick the right kind of wood stain. Like I said, preserva wood, that just comes to mind because I've used it before. There are others out there. I mean, just take your time, look, drop me a comment, and we can discuss it maybe further in another video. I might have one when I built my patio that I went into more detail. You can look back. Yeah, you can paint it if you want. I mean, I don't like painting wood like this. I mean, I like things to look natural, or if I add a little bit of stain to give it some character, but I like the wood grain showing through. You do a bench like this and you want to paint it red or something, it's your bench, do what you want. But to me, I don't think it's attractive. It's not what I would do. So I would tell you to read a little bit about how to seal it first and then apply your coats of paint to it. But then you're probably going to want to apply something over the paint to have a further protective barrier. But you do a web search on it, because I don't do that with any of my wood. Well, no, the same thing holds true whether it's the wood or the steel. I mean, anything where somebody's going to come into contact with it, or whether it's visible, I'll use a grinding wheel or one of my, abrasive flap discs, and I take all the burrs off and I round all the sharp corners, and I clean everything up and clean the splatter off and all that. Again, use acetone, then use whatever color paint you want over the top of that. Now, on tables like this, after I've cleaned it with acetone, truthfully, I use a primer. Then I lightly hit the primer with, a higher grit sandpaper, 320 or better, and then I go over it with my paint. I probably missed saying that on previous videos, but when I get into larger projects, I use primer, and use a decent quality primer. Okay, I think that's it for, the questions and answers this time. I hope, maybe you get a little inspiration out of this and you want to try to make your own bench, or it gives you some ideas for the future. You can gather up your steel. You don't have to bang this out in a day. Take your time, do it right, make sure things, where people make errors on these is trying to make them straight, level, plumb, and all of that. But with some simple hand tools, you could even use a framing square. You could use a metal square. You can use those magnets I keep telling you about. And then you just want to check your squareness. Make sure everything's nice and straight. Take your time. Spot weld it first. Never fully weld it first. Spot weld. Hit all 4 corners. Take a look at it. Make sure it's square. Make sure it's level. Make sure it's plumb. Whatever you want to say. And then wait. And then you can go to town and have fun, creating and finishing out all your welds and cleaning them up. Home Handyman, I hope you guys have a good day. I hope you click subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.